people here visiting the Bay Area District. So you're here for the State Park Interpreter 1 application and exam resources session. I'm Karen Barrett. I'm the Regional Interpretive Specialist for Bay Area District. And I have a great team who's helped put together evening session. So welcome you all. I am so grateful you are here. We're in a very positive time for interpretation in California State Parks. It's been a transformation of California State Park, a whole transformation effort. And as a result of that, one really great outcome is a recognition and growing program equity of interpretation with our other core program areas. So it's a really helpful time. We've gone through a service-based budgeting effort and looking at what are the tasks that support interpretation, education, and volunteerism. And as a result, through working with some of you who have been involved in that work, it just showed the definite need. I'm very grateful to our district superintendent, Vic Buckley, and the support of John Fraser, Division Chief for Interpretation and Education Division, to help us put together this evening session. And really, I'm very happy to have you here. Grateful for your support. I know what got me starting and the team started on this specifically for Bay Area District is in the short-term planning. That's told me that we do look on a short-term years or so horizon that will be creating more interpreter one positions in the district. So it's a very hopeful time. I used to be the only interpreter, full-time interpreter in the district. And then we joined with the old Marin district and had Casey and Terry Pope join as interpreters. So now we have many more interpretive positions, including Rosanna, who I'll introduce you to in a second. So it is a very positive time. I've been working for Parks my entire working life. I started in high school, so I have some history with interpretation, and really want to bring that message to you. I wanted to do this session because in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have many organizations that provide interpretation, very fine organizations, and we have a lot of people who are experienced interpreters who are working as seasonals.
Recording has stopped.
I worked 14 years as a seasonal for the National Park Service. So I know what it's like to be a seasonal and be a frontline interpreter. So I really appreciate you. We're not going to tell you what's on this exam. I want to be clear to that. What we're doing.
Recording has started.
But what we are going to tell you some of the things that we've learned through taking many exams and many state exams through time, and how a lot of the keys of how to prepare for exam are right in your hand, right in that packet that I gave you. Then that is the exam bulletin. So if you know how to kind of decipher that, it gives you a heads up on what to study and what to be prepared for. Those are the types of things we'll be going to. We're in a new era of exam taking. They have online exams, and we'll provide some tips that we've learned from our personnel analyst about how to take online exams and some things to expect. So I, again, appreciate your time, and I want to introduce our team here of presenters. I'm very fortunate to be joined by Casey Dexter-Lee today, interpreter interpreter 2 from Angel Island. Casey in itself is a very experienced interpreter. She's been at Angel Island for many years and is promoted to interpreter 2 position. She was involved in our education video conferencing program and just is almost the day-to-day manager of many of the operations there at Angel Island. She's a great field experience. And Rosanna Petralia is interpreter 1 at Mount Tamalpais State Park. Where Rosanna knows what it's like to be a seasonal. She spent a long time being a seasonal at Año Nuevo State Park, and we're very fortunate to have her there, where she works with a special partnership, One TAM. It's a collaboration of many entities to support interpretation and programming on that mountain and taking care of Michelle Pius. And then Ben Finkel, well, not even behind the camera today. I first met him when he was an interpreter one at Angel Island. He has a long experience working with state parks and also in the Capital District. He now is with our award-winning educational video conferencing program and that we know as sports. And I'm so glad that Ben is here is making the video conferencing possible. So let's get underway. So I did give you, those of you who are in the room, I did provide a packet of handouts. You'll see that there's the agenda there. There's the exam bulletin, the classification specifications for State Park Interpreter 1. There's also some little aids that the teams developed. One is getting you to look at those things that to perform the exam. You'll need to know a little bit about what you need to know, the knowledge of different items that are found on the exam bulletin, a list of things that that interpreters need to know about to get into this classification. So it's sort of a self-rating list there. And then there's also a list of sort of have you reflect after the training today and plan ahead. And remember the final filing date for your state application is January 11th.
Is that postmarked January 11th? Or
Yes.
see it?
Postmark, and I would strongly recommend that when you mail something to the state, you mail it return receipt so that you have documentation. It's worth the extra few dollars that you made the filing time. And of course, you can bring it to Sacramento and hand it to them over the counter. But I always make them date stamp it and sign it to who I handed it over with. So those are some little tips. So next, talking about the exam bulletin, Ben's going to go over the exam bulletin. So if you look at it in your packets, they'll probably just follow through for the overview.
Okay, so everybody has this in their packets, which is the exam announcements. I'm not going to go into super detail about this because that's the rest of the training of the session today. Casey and Rosanna are going to go through the particulars about it, but I just want to make sure that we kind of quickly go over the different sections of this so we're not missing anything important. Other than the filing instructions, like Karen just mentioned, they're very important to get that in. If you physically take it in, I would definitely do that date stamp. I've had issues where mine got lost in the mail or things like that, so having a physical verification as a receipt or something like that. There is sometimes an option if you call in, you can fax it in to them as long as the postmark is, you have something with a postmark that gets mailed to them so that they feel comfortable that you got it in at least one way, but make sure that it's mailed, the postmark is mailed by the 11th. So that's all in this first section here. So just make sure you're always reading over that information to make sure you have your dates correct. And that's uber important because they put it here, they're stickler for that, and they usually won't budge on that kind of information. Examination information. This is the biggest change for us for this particular exam. Karen had information from the last one that was offered in 2014, and it's completely different information that was offered, and the style of the exam is completely different. So we'll get into that later, but this is really good information to see. This will tell you if it's an online exam. This will tell you this new skills assessment version. They can't hear me out there? Use my interpreter voice. This portion here is super important to read through to see what kind of exam this is. So if it's a partial interview, partial written, that'll be included in the information here. But this one says training experience T&E examination of a qualifications assessment. So totally different animal than we've ever dealt with in the interpreter series. So this is a new thing for us, and that's why this session is so important, because we're going to be going over what that means for this exam. It's the entire exam. The whole skills assessment is this exam. So it's very different from before where you had different portions. This is the exam, so it's really understanding what that means is really important.
I have two questions. One is, will the written materials be available to online participants after?
Yeah, I think we have stuff in. So if they would like to email me their email address, we can send that to them, which was in the initial Blue Jeans.
And then is the recording going to be available after the fact?
Yes. You all good out there? Their sound is off, so they won't confuse. Let's see. Eligible list information. This is also new. Not new as a section, but in previous times, this list has always been a 2-year thing. And now it's only 12 months. So make sure you are checking those kinds of things. And if you don't get a position within this round, and then they offer the exam again, you have to take it again in 12 months. They abolish the initial list and start over. So that's typical. But again, like I said, in past times, it's been a 2-year thing. And actually, within the last recent years, it's been 4 years, and we're actually down to the very last folks in the lower ranks because they haven't offered the exam in so long. So hopefully this 12-month thing means that they're going to be offering it more, but we don't know. But as Karen mentioned, in this district at least, she knows that there's going to be future opportunities for interpreter ones, and that's what we've gotten from our division chief as well. With some of the new initiatives in parks, there's going to be more opportunities throughout the state. So that kind of is really hopeful to see that here. Again, just going through these kinds of things, requirements for admittance, education requirement, they are checking that even more strictly than they have in the past. In the past, you just had to have a 4-year degree, and it actually could be in pretty much anything. Now, you have to have a degree within certain types of areas of resource management, anything within history, let's see, does it say here? No, it doesn't say exactly. Communications, okay. So it'll list it, but kind of think of those natural resource history kind of areas. We have had even seasonal applicants apply for just a seasonal position, and their degree was not in that area and it was kicked out. So they're being very strict on how this is, how they're looking at your examination admittance. And then MQs. MQs is the minimum qualifications. You have to have the qualified experience, either 1, 2, or 3, and the equivalent education from college, whether it is interpretation, social science, natural science, communications, or related fields. And then position is this is kind of a general overview of what the position does in general. We all know each individual park, it's different for where we work. But this is important to know is if you look at the kind of language they use for this position in general, you kind of want to get used to those types of terms because when you go to take the skills assessment part, what we'll talk about later, they don't care what your individual park is or what you individually did at your park because it's so specific to that park. They want to know in general, do you fit within these minimum qualifications? Does your work fit within the general position of the description, or the general description of the position?
How can we ask questions from the video chat?
5 minutes. So
You're over.
oh, okay. Examinations. So this is kind of general stuff again for this classification knowledge, and they'll go through that real quick. Special personal characteristics. It's what we all do now. We work over hours, we work late, we work on weekends, we work when we have to work, we come in because, our special animals in our cages got loose, I don't know. But we all know what we do. We've all done it as seasonals for years, so they're just asking you to remind you about that. And then the last few things are veterans preference, career credits. You will probably not score 100% on this. Even if you score 95%, there still might be a possibility of 10 people above you because they have veterans credits, they have state service credits, things like that. So don't feel bad if you score in a 98, but you're in rank 3. That's just because there's these other possibilities for points that come in and can affect where you stand on this list. Yes?
For the, excuse me, for Joe, for the career credits, that include NPS or just state farm?
It has to be state.
Yeah. State.
And then again, general information. And then there is information on here about who to contact if you have questions, things like that. This is a real number on the very bottom, 653-3536. I called it. There's a real person there. So feel free to use that as a resource. And they will answer. The analyst, if you want to write this down, because she takes questions, her name is Jeannie Krause, Jeanne Krause. She is the specific analyst that is taking care of this exam. And she...
You need to spell Kraus.
Kraus.
Page 2 of this form.
Okay, perfect. See, he's already seen them. And I talked to her. She can't obviously answer anything specific about what questions there are, but she was very helpful in answering general questions. Yes? Questions from the...
So 2 questions from the chat. Is there a comprehensive list of approved areas of study? I think that's a Jeannie Krause question, probably.
I think that would be
Because that, it just says social science.
Scope,
Yeah.
which I'm just about to talk about.
Because that's social science. It's very, very broad. And then the other question, so we're working on that for you. And then the other question, it was just a logistical thing. Could you please repeat the questions in the class before you answer them? Because they have a hard time hearing the folks in the room.
Okay, that's it. I'll be back.
Mine's just very brief, and I actually misunderstood that question, and Vince correct the question about your education and the fields of study that if you have a different degree title, you're uncertain if it falls within this, you'll need to call Dean Krause. So really what's great about the exam bulletin, I'll have to tell you, I took a lot of state exams before I knew this, that the area that you're going to study on the exam is under the examination scope. So that knowledge of and ability to. And as Ben was speaking about, we're talking about not things that maybe so specific to your park, but think about interpretive skills. And so that's why things are listed that way.
Recording has stopped.
The application, you're going to list what your experience is and fill out the application. But I'm talking about when you're taking the exam. So
Recording has started.
Presented a school group program at a historic site. Well, think about what the skill set is and involved in doing something like that. You involve research, you know how to organize a presentation, those type of presentation skills. So thinking broader beyond, just that particular job experience. And to go into more detail, next we have Rosanna, who's going to talk about the knowledge of specification.
Yeah, you should talk about the state park.
I'm sorry, I got so excited and felt we're running behind.
Sorry, it's okay.
How do we make this go?
You just do.
Yay! Technology is working. I don't know how to deal with that.
Worrying about that.
The internet people are now having their own conversations, just so you know. They're correcting each other.
Oh my gosh, don't go to the tape. Can you do one set of lights?
Okay,
It'll be easier.
thank you. Thanks, Captain.
Florence, last year, the flipper plus ice cream. From beginning.
Thank you. Oh, it's going to hide my note. No, it's not. Again, not used to technology working. How many of you have been waiting more than a year for this exam? How many of you have been waiting more than 2 years? Right? I should mention I am just getting over some laryngitis. And so I'm going to talk as loud as I can for you guys back there. But my voice is all over the place. I was voice for 3 days, like 2 days ago, 4 days ago. So, so that you have those printed out in your packets if you're in the room. And I also have the links on here, and I'll give this PowerPoint to Ben or Karen, whoever's going to be emailing stuff out, so you don't have to take scrupulous notes if you want to take notes. But the website's on here if you want to look at it directly online. And so this is just describing what the job is. And so what I did was look at that Cal HR statement and then link it up with the exam. So where the triangles are, that is what is describing that exact same thing in that other document. So this is Cal HR, the definition. In the exam announcement, they call the definition the position description. Exactly pulled off HR. So I think, did you read that when you were up here already? So under directions to do the less difficult or varied work in the planning, research, and development in or direct small interpretive projects. So in those jobs. This section of the classification specification is not in the exam announcement. Does that mean you won't be asked about these topics? We don't know. I think if it wasn't clear, we've never taken this exam because it's brand new. So we really have no idea exactly what is going to be on there. So let's look at them just in case. Assists in planning, developing, and researching portions of large interpretive projects, directs the work of intermittent staff on small interpretive projects, performs the less difficult research and development of material for interpretive projects, maintains a reference library and photographic and specimen collections, compiles information and prepares reports and other interpretive material, assists in training intermittent and other staff in interpretive methods and techniques, assist in the planning and development of material for interpretive exhibits. So this is a lot that's not on that exam announcement. And so the difference between what you're preparing, if it's just the exam announcement, and this is big. So in the past, exams have covered this type of information, but it's not on the exam announcement. We really just don't know which way it's going to go. Keep in mind when you're looking for your experiences in these from work, but also volunteer experience you might have on those topics if you haven't been paid to do that type of work. So these areas, minimum qualification, are but on the same on both documents. Come back to those in a sec. You'll find knowledge and abilities under the exam scope. You can a little bit, and the cursor are also the same in both versions. Okay, minimum qualifications. I've included the full version of what appears in the exam announcement up here. The first section is attempting to explain the substitution process for those of you that do not have the degree, which I'll circle back around to in a second. Clearly, this was not written by an interpreter. Super confusing. So experience, 1 year of experience. So I've listed some places that you may have worked or volunteered that might help jog your memory. So I think we have some NPS folks, volunteer work, state parks, city, your educational coursework, internships. There's all different kinds of ways that you might come to this 1 year of experience. Make sure that these are listed as jobs on your application, because that's what they're looking for. Don't leave them off because they were a long time ago or that you don't think they're relevant. Does anyone have any additional examples maybe of places you might get interpretive experience?
If you had some training or certification, would you put that under jobs or?
There is a place on the application for listing certificates, and I'm going to be doing the application kind of deep dive more toward the end, but there is a spot to put that.
I was a tour guide in college, so when I was filling out my application, it's like the very last one.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it fits.
Yeah, so that you were doing like tours of the campus.
Exactly. For incoming or potential students.
Yeah, that's definitely very much what we do. All right. Okay, so education. Equivalent to graduation from college with major work in interpretation, social sciences, natural sciences, communications, or closely related fields. And so is anyone concerned about their subject matter? I think we already got that from the chat, so we're gonna defer to, is it Jean for that. And then is anyone using years of experience to substitute for education? No one in this room. Is there anyone out there in the world? So just in case someone who's watching is doing that, so that very confusing substitution algorithm word problem at the beginning, it just means that you need to have at least 2 years of education, and if you don't have those last 2 years of education, you can use 2 years of experience to make up for it.
And just as they're being strict with the area of education, they're asking you down to the semester how many units you have to make up that education requirement.
So I've never had to do this application, so my experience is with the National Park Service, and so they make you pick education, experience, or a combination of the two. And people have given me various responses as to like, well, if you have both of them, which one should you pick? And I'm wondering if there is is education better in this realm than experience, or if you have both?
Okay, so just so I can repeat the question in case people didn't hear. So is there more value to having extra education or extra experience when you're doing the application?
Yeah, or just what does it look like when you're actually doing this?
So when you're actually filling out the form, I would put every single thing you have.
Yeah.
If you have lots of education, there is a section specifically for education, and then there's a separate section for jobs.
Okay.
And so put everything on there. I wouldn't leave anything out. If you own, like I've worked at my park for 17 years. So you only need 1 year of experience, right? So I'm not going to not mention the other 16 there. You're going to put that all in there.
Can I just add as well, because they get so many applications, they're looking for these buzzwords and things like that. So they're just going to go through and highlight.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to kind of support what Casey's saying, put everything.
All right. So those education and experience requirements have to be fulfilled by the submission date, January 11th. So if you're graduating with your 4-year degree on January 10th, on the 12th, it's potentially problematic. You might have to have a year of experience to make up for that. I think that would be worth protesting. Okay, so I'm going to hand things over to Rosanna for are you using this as well? No? Okay, so I'll just turn this video off so it's not distracting.
Can you pass this wrong?
So you're not going to use the screen, Rosanna?
Yes, I am going to use this screen, but not this.
Okay.
I need your, did you get one for me?
Sorry.
And what?
Oh,
Oh, very important. Thank you.
I shouldn't touch other patients. All right, but you all don't keep it smart, playful, and adapted to change. So
I think that is good things to remind her as interpreter. So, and it's my little mascot today. So let me type in password if I remember it. I hope that it doesn't really work. Oh yes, capital messed up. So I would like you to go into your application, go to page 3 of your application. There is like a list of knowledge of under the examination scope. Sure you are in there. We'll go through this. Yeah. I'm completely off. I'll try to be quick. So I think that, reading through this list, there are certain things that are kind of obvious that are part of your education, that should be part of your education. And there are like so many resources there, like out there, like the books that you would have to study for. I don't think you should focus on that. But there's definitely some of the first things here, like method and techniques of interpretation. Method and techniques of interpretation regards communication theory and learning styles of like adults and kids. So you should learn, should be aware of what that means. So the process between, the triangulation between the interpreter, the audience, and the resource that you're talking about, and method of communication with the public, depending on what the audience is interested in. So why adults want to learn anything? Are they there to learn? Are they there for whatever? What is the reason? So those are kind of methods and techniques of interpretation. I'm going to, if you look in the handouts that I gave you, there is one section, the first one, that that talks about interpretation. Is one kind of little, the first page, actually the front, that has 3 different sections. And there is one with interpretation. Can you see anything? No. Oh, I don't see anything. But anyway, you have it in front of you. There is definitely Interpretive Our Heritage by Freeman Tilden. If you haven't read that book, you should read it immediately. Although, keep in mind that California State Parks principle and interpretation actually are based on gathering provocation and there's all that. But they're based on something called rapport. So it adds to those 6 principles that Tilden describes in his book. They add a little more things. For example, they start talking about, programmatically accessible, programs, which also includes, situation where people with disabilities or older adults coming to your programs, and how do you address like the needs of the audience in that case. But definitely, and introduce thematic interpretation, which Freeman Tilden doesn't talk about thematic interpretation, and it's very important that you understand what thematic interpretation is and how to build a theme. And for that, I really recommend this book. This has just the strategies of writing a theme from zero. And it's used by training in California State Park training for interpreters. So Sam has interpretation making a difference. See it here. You're able to look at this, and this is the Freeman Tilden book. So that kind of gives you some idea on principle of public interpretation. There is also a resource online. I wish this was working. I don't know. Right now I'm kind of sick, so I cannot really understand it. But if you look on the same page, there is one column on the right that says California State Parks, Resources and Tools. That is available online, and there are different manuals that you can access, and one is called BILS, B-I-L-S, Basic Interpretation Learning System, and it has all the details about rapport and different kind of interpretation that are done at state parks, details on how to, build a thematic interpretive programs, how to build a walk, or a talk, or a campfire, any of those. So deals is definitely important. There you go. Oh, yeah, okay, so if you go, and then how do you take this thing off? Just click somewhere. Okay. No. Obviously. We'll just keep it there. Let's go for this one. Maybe I'll move it this way. So this is the website, parks.ca.gov, right here. It's available to everyone, and if you go to learning, it appears all this menu, drop-down menu. And if you go to resources and tools right here, you get a lot of information. Here, there are resources about program policies and handbooks. And these are all the different things that are in there. But this is the most important, in my opinion, where you should probably focus your, because I don't know how much time you will have between your application and the exam. Could be 2 weeks, could be 2 months. I don't really know. It was 3 months when I did it, but it'll be shorter. They might have their stuff together. So if you go under Interpreter Service Coordination and Management, you will have Aiming for Excellence, the handbook. Yeah, you access the handbook from here, and there will be a PDF. The Basic Interpretation Learning System has different chapters of the modules here, and it has everything from the history of, short history of interpretation, with the principle of interpretation. It has all the evaluation. Under evaluation, there will be like the forms about rapport with all the different, so for example, there are the forms are probably at the end. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, these are the forms for rapport, and it gives you like all the details about, they're not, I guess they're not in here. Oh, okay. Forms, that's it. So under forms, you will see what the report are. So the different items about relevance, accuracy, provocation, and then all the different things that you have to provide into a program. Thematic, retain, organize, programmatically accessible, and then all the different ways of self-evaluation and things like that. So anyway, look through these bills because it has a lot of information, and it's key to what you're going to do and what you need to know. Then there are like cultural resources and natural resources. Knowledge of cultural resources and natural resources is very important, but I don't know how much in depth they will go into the exam. So, I mean, it's so vast. But, we have the Natural History of California that you can double check and have with you maybe when you're taking the test. I mean, that is the thing, like you're taking the test at home, so you can have reference. You want to have your reference ready. And
seriously, can you have references?
why you're taking the test.
Yeah.
I don't see why not.
Well, I don't know.
We'll go into that.
I've never taken an online test.
We'll go into
Yeah.
that, Kathleen.
Yeah.
We'll go into it.
You have a specific time that you have to do the test. But some of these so for example, some of them are important. Natural history of California, I think, is really good. Another one that was suggested when I took the first test was the California Wild Heritage and Endangered Animals in the state. That is actually an excellent book, and it gives you a very wide, general understanding of the kind of environment, and the diversity of the environments in California, and what are the, why are we protecting? Why there's these parks, here and there. So it's very interesting. So this is our little view of these resources that you have. And the last one that I want to see is learning theory. Here you learn things like that. You learn about adult learning mostly, and the different kind of intelligences. The visual. People learn more visually. People learn more from listening. There are different people out there, so you might want to incorporate those in your programs, and that's why they're asking you to learn to know about this one. So how to incorporate different sensorial experience for the visitors in order that everyone can feel included in the program. So those are 3 examples. I don't have it in your, but I can send it out to you. These 3 different references. For scientific research and methods, number 5. Much I'm going.
Yeah, you're almost 5 minutes over.
Oh, really? I started at 7:30. Scientific research methods, you want to search on qualitative methods and quantitative methods. So qualitative would be interviews, kind of things that are more like related to ethnography, how to design a survey, questions and things like that. Qualitative would be more data analysis, statistics, how to interpret stats, and things like that. How much do you need to know those for the exam? I have no idea, because from my recollection, I have never seen a question that relates to that. I think it's more related to your job and to the understanding of scientific papers or peer-reviewed papers and the interpretation of those in order to do your research and to choose the right information to support your programs.
Can you repeat those 2 words again? Qualitative and quantitative?
Quantitative is quantities,
Yeah.
numbers. Quality is categories more, like I'm white, Caucasian, and someone else is a Latino. And those kind of things will happen to work with those things because they are important to represent people. Audiovisual techniques, there are things like that I still kind of, I'm still battling with. But, I don't know how much of this is going to be including social media, because now it's very much part of the interpretation, or, things about shared documents, things about distance learning, like PORT or Skype classes, classrooms, things like that. You might want to check on different things. And you want to also maybe go online and check what kind of what the people are doing on social media, on state parks as well as national parks. How do they present the information? So do a little bit of research in that sense. I think that's all that I want. I'm going to skip the number 7 and give it to Casey, because she's more knowledgeable of that. I don't know really much about historical objects inside of the buildings. So we already agreed that she was going to take over that kind of resources, method and techniques. Diverse media and commercial and fine arts. That is like, are you interested in art? I mean, you will have to most likely work on exhibits sometimes when you will work as an interpreter. And so maybe design, element of design will be good resources. And maybe understanding some of the design methods. And I don't think anybody is expecting you to be an illustrator or anything like that. So it's probably more about design. I would focus more about design than anything else. If you just search elements of design, it will be framing, lines, shapes, things like that, generally. And I think I've finished up. So if you have any questions about the resources and anything that I have shown you, please email me. And I will be happy to respond to you probably as promptly as possible so that you can have further information. Oh, another thing is this recommended list. I found it online, actually. It's somewhere in the State Park website. And there are some, the last two, the last in the first page, recommended resources of the interpreted library. The last one is about science, trail, and exhibits. The last one in the first page. Mm-hmm. And so that is a really interesting one. And then the last one in the second page is about interpretive centers, the history, design, and development of nature and visitor centers. So those might be good resources for you to check on those topics. Thank you, Rosanna. Thank you.
Before Casey starts, that's a lot of information. Casey's going to do a little deep dive into the other section. But a really good jumping off point for all of this is to look at the basic interpretive learning system, the SILS handbook that you can find on the State Park website. So that's a really good jumping point. It talks about some of the quantitative and qualitative things, and so that's kind of a good orientation, I think.
Okay, so jumping back to number 7, methods and techniques used in preserving and interpreting historical objects, sites, and buildings. Totally forgot I said I was going to do that. The thing that immediately came to mind for me were McPhee, Museum Collections Facilities Index, which is an acronym for how we report on the conditions that our collections and historic buildings are currently in. So it's just a nice summary of all the things you should be thinking about when it comes to collections and historic sites.
Could you repeat that again?
McPhee, Museum Collections Index Facility? What is it? Facilities Index. Sorry, Facilities Index, MCFI. And so, there's a page for each element of things that can go wrong with your collection. So there's a page about light, and it has specific items dealing with light. Is the light in this structure below X number of candles, right? Is there UV film on windows? Are there windows in the building? Where are this supposed to, these things would be collected. So it goes through all the different topics, mold, pest, security, vibration, earthquakes, or if you're by a big trucking thing, things that might shake off the shelves. So it goes through all those different topics, and it even has a separate page just for outdoor facilities. So some of our larger collections items are sometimes actually stored outside. So that's a great resource, and it kind of will hit on all the things that impact our collections. So I feel like that.
I think that resources is in the resource and tools section.
Yeah.
If you dig into that, you will find it.
Okay, so for continuing in the examination scope, the ability to, so there's 8 different categories in here. We're going to run through them. Plan interpretive exhibits, and programs. I can't see my notes. So these are just some of the subjects that you might have had experience with in other jobs or volunteer positions. Interplans are supposed to be working on things like this. And so I really encourage you, if you haven't had the opportunity, to find a way to do some of this stuff. If it's as a seasonal, as a volunteer, so getting exposed to all these different types of interpretive offerings in parks. So there's some resources. Is that too tiny?
No.
Resources for planners. The Interpret Ed section of the DOM, the Department Operations Manual. Interpret Ed is 900, that's the chapter, but 902 specifically is about planning and interpretation. The UDF is the Unit Data File, so those are any document that anyone has ever wanted to save about a particular park unit, but it also has general documents as well. Planning handbook, which is guidelines for planning documents. So it's the how-to of the how-to. And so planning documents are things like general plans, interpretive master plans, interpretive project plans. So those are where you get a lot of the skills and knowledge for planning. Also things to consider: scope of collections. Those are documents usually specific to a park unit, sometimes to a certain aspect of the park's history, natural, cultural, that tells you what you should and shouldn't be taking into your collections. And then there's also the California State Parks Intellectual Property Handbook. Gives you guidelines on how to use information that you may see. Oh, that's super annoying. Is there a way to change this view, Ben?
Yes. Just want to bring this up now.
It happened this week.
I want to give a plug for the team. All of these people have full-time jobs, more than full-time jobs, and they volunteered to do this. So, and you can see like half the team sick.
Oh, that doesn't matter. It was like cutting that off. But okay. Awesome. Thank you. Oh, remember, this one also, it says plan. That doesn't mean that the thing you helped plan has to exist. Right? You just had to help plan. Okay. Coordinate the interpretive input of other specialists. I try and talk to as many of the specialists that come to my park as possible. There's always something to learn about how the park's water system works. What invasive species are being targeted that year? What stories from the past are the most relevant to today's current event? At my park, we try to meet once a week with the interpretive staff. This is an informal way of coming together and bringing our different viewpoints together so we can move towards common goals. We also might meet annually to do longer-term planning for the park's interpretive offerings. And of course, when working on specific projects, there could be many meetings with everyone on this list. Are there any other specialists that I didn't mention? So on here is the scientists, teachers, environmental scientists, archaeologists, historians, subject matter experts, coworkers, volunteers.
Let's say tribal representatives.
Tribal representatives, good one. We don't do that a lot. That is very good. It does come up occasionally. Just as a side note, there's usually one state park tribal representative, or what are they called?
Liaison.
Liaison, and in Bay Area District, Kate Green.
Yeah. So that's another reason, like sometimes you don't do it directly. It involves another team member to get those conversations.
Curators, we work with our
Curators is awesome. Someday we'll happening in this photo? So if you say the tiger is injured, you would be accurate, but it would be confusing. You probably don't have tigers as your main concern. But what I think they're talking about here, from an interpreter point of view, is your interactions with others, analysis of content, whether it be written or oral presentations, taking action from that analysis. Every visitor that comes up to me asking the same 1 to 3 questions might mean I need to make sure all the volunteers know the answers to those questions, or maybe we need an interpreter panel that answers those questions. So you have to cover that information at the beginning of your tour. That's another way to kind of handle that situation. There's many ways to take action. Establish and maintain cooperative relations with those contacted in the course of work. Just reflect on who and how you interact with people. These were just some people I was thinking of that you might be interacting with, you need to have nice relationships with, or professional relationships with. There, again, maybe tribal representatives, subject matter experts,
Park partners.
So there's always a relationship. You know, we do not operate in a vacuum. And so we're working within the agency and outside the agency. Interpret historical concepts to the public. If you haven't worked in a historic setting, this may seem more difficult. I listed some of the methods, techniques, and tools that may help you remember settings in which you covered historic concepts. For those of you with more natural history focus in your careers, think about how you talk about plants, animals, the environment, geology, geography. Do you talk about how humans use those resources or interacted with them, or maybe how they do today? So that might be a way to shoehorn in some cultural into a more natural history focused experience. Communicate effectively. I'm going to go back to report because that is how we evaluate interpretive offerings. If you don't have it memorized, don't worry. Wrote them all down. Communication is also about your audience. If you don't know a little about who you're talking to, it'll be harder to communicate effectively. One good resource along those lines is With All Due Respect, which I think Rosanna mentioned, which is the TARCS document that talks about physical limitations or disabilities that might affect the visitor experience and how interpretive offerings can be more accessible to everyone. Keep necessary records and prepare reports. These are some examples of the types of reports and statistics that we keep, but you may have work or life experience that demonstrates the ability to do this. Anyone want to share a real world example of statistics or reports that they had to create that have nothing to do with you?
So in one of the museums I work in, we do like content evaluation where we're talking to visitors about the limitations of different exhibits that we have, and then we do qualitative interviews for that, but then we end up quantifying them by coding the different things that visitors say over and over again to bring that back to exhibit developers and try to redesign to improve.
All right, so Leah has a lot of experience with visitor surveys and compiling that data that would definitely show that you have the ability to do that kind of work. All right, awesome. So another little break. Analyze facts and draw conclusions. I'll give you a moment to think about the puzzle on the left before we go to the one on the right. have the opinion.
Maybe you should say about that.
If Teresa's daughter is my daughter's mother,
No, I
then
know.
what is my relationship to Teresa? Okay.
Good news is, nothing like this will be on the
I think that you're her granddaughter.
That sounds
All
right.
right. So we analyze some facts.
Coffee, anyone?
All right. So how about the one on the right? How many sticks are there? Also not required for interpretation. But, you have analyzed facts and made conclusions in your life, I'm hoping. All right. I think it's on to someone else. Nope, it's me again. Okay. The application. Who has not sent in their application in this room? Oh. Okay. Because I was a little worried that there was no point in me doing this. They would all sent it in. So awesome. Okay. So if you go on to the online version, you might get this big giant message that says, you can't save this. So make sure that you have the time to complete it and print it, and the capability to print from the computer that you are working on, or you're going to be bad because you have to do it again. And I often will write out, I keep a Word file of this stuff, and then I copy and paste, especially the descriptive parts in, so I don't have to rewrite them all the time. Even though there's a little button at the top that says you can save, it's probably lying to you. It depends how you access the forms to make sure you have the ability to print.
Okay, so I spent 6 hours on this for point of insanity today. And so what I did was I downloaded a new PDF system. And then I was able to save it through that on my desktop with everything. So every time it froze, shut down, something else, I went back to the save copy and refined it.
Yeah,
And now I have an entire one that's printed out rather.
Okay, so what do you say? It depends on the system you have and your software. Sometimes there are ways to save it, but assume you can't.
I have a question. It said on the CalHR website that after January 1st, you are going to be able to apply online. So I was thinking like,
I don't think that is the case for this examination, from what I've read on this
I would
and maybe it's
follow what is in the example.
right.
it says to physically mail it in or hand deliver it. Maybe that's for exams or
Other
things
ones,
in the future.
If there are certain skills or abilities that you want to put in the employment stuff, but you run out of space, is there an option to include more information?
I would
You
say
can attach.
you can attach, but put all the,
Repeat the question, so.
Yeah.
Oh, so the question is, if you run out of space in the block to say how awesome you are, what do you do? And so you can attach additional sheets of paper, but I would edit, honestly, because like the people, if every single person here are the only people sending it in, there's going to be like 45 of these things they're going to be looking at, they're going to, so like, there's probably plenty of space. And you can, I wouldn't be so concerned about like every sentence being perfect. I would use a lot of commas and get stuff in there.
abbreviate, put all the relevant information at the top as well.
Yeah, I think it says that.
Is the application something that, like, is like number ranking, is that the only thing that goes to a hiring official, or will they also get an application with their package? Well, if I end up passing this unknown.
Yeah. When you apply for a position,
Yeah.
you will send in a new application
Oh, okay.
to that specific job, and that is what your
So
potential
nobody
employer will
besides
see.
HR see this.
Correct.
That is correct. Only HR will see the exam application.
But the HR will see, if there's a position in a park, they will also see that, and they're forward certain ones to the hiring supervisor.
Yeah. When you send it to the park, you actually are sending it to HR, and